Hello and welcome to a brand new restoration video. So you join me in the scrapyard. This is basically where I keep all of my mowers and restoration projects which are yet to be worked on. I have two engines back here, a Honda and a Briggs & Stratton, and I think it's about time I started to fix these up. So in this video we're going to be restoring the Honda engine. With the engine now in the workshop, the first thing I need to do is to assess its condition. Well, it does turn over, which is a bonus. Next, I'm removing the air filter cover to inspect the carburetor. Quite clearly there is a lot of surface rust on everything. Well, the air filter actually doesn't look too bad at all. As for the intake, again, there is quite a bit of rust. So this might indicate that water has been getting passed through the air filter and into the carburetor. Thankfully, the carburetor looks fairly clean inside. With the spark plug removed, I can now inspect the cylinder. That's not good. Water inside the cylinder. This may be condensation or it might be rain that's got in through the carburetor. Let's have a closer look with the camera. Okay, so you can see the water in there. Amazingly, it looks really clean. And I can't see any rust on the bore, so this is a good sign. I'll spin the engine over at speed and hopefully the water will fire out. That seems to have done the trick. Now I'm going to inspect the carburetor bowl. Firstly, I'm removing the drain bolt to see if we have any liquid in here. It seems to be dry in there, so now I can remove the main bolt and I can drop the bowl off. Well, the bowl is clean and dry. Another good sign. It's so weird because this engine looks so bad, but actually maybe it isn't bad at all. I'm just going to quickly check to see if we have any oil, so I can squirt some carb spray into the carburetor and see if it will fire. This is mind-blowing. It actually does run, but of course this isn't running through the carburetor. That will likely need to be cleaned. But I'm going to be disassembling the entire engine so that I can check it, clean it, and reassemble it. The disassembly begins, starting with the flywheel. Next we have the carburetor and the linkages. As is the case with most mufflers which have been left outside, these bolts are very stubborn. When I get to a really bad bolt, sometimes I heat and quench it. This can really assist with the removal process. However, I seem to have got quite lucky with this one. The nut is stuck on the stud, but it really shouldn't matter too much. It's hard to believe this whole area was once nice and shiny, but this is the throttle plate. We then have the ignition coil. Obviously this does work because the engine has run, so it just needs to be cleaned up. This arm you can see on the top of the engine is actually the governor arm, which is attached to the governor. This regulates the speed of the engine. Moving around to the front of the engine, we now have the valve rocker cover. Underneath here we have the valve springs. I'm not concerned about damaging any of the gaskets because I do have a new full gasket rebuild kit. With the cover removed, I can now remove the cylinder head itself. There are 4 bolts which hold it on. And with a little bit of persuasion, the cylinder head can be removed. So for the first time we can properly inspect what the cylinder head looks like, and it really isn't too bad. We've got some carbon buildup, but this is very common. It actually is all looking very good. These 2 rods here are called push rods, and these open and close the valves. So far, so good. Let's take the crankcase cover off. As this engine has been left outside, there is a bit of a rusty lip which has appeared on the crankshaft, so I'm just cleaning that up prior to removal. And there we have it, we can have a good look inside. It certainly looks to be fairly clean. I really don't think this engine was bad before it was abandoned outside in the rain. This is the camshaft. That also looks to be very good. This is followed by the valve tappets, which the camshaft lobes push on, and then in turn push the push rods, and then open and close the valves. So let's remove the piston. To do this we need to disconnect the connecting rod from the crankshaft. Both the connecting rod and the piston look to be in very good reusable condition. It's also worth noting that off camera I do also check the ring gap, and they're all within spec, so they do not need to be replaced. This is the governor shaft that just very simply slides out. And as you can see, we do have water mixed in with the oil. It's not too extreme. When there's a lot of water it tends to go like a milky colour, so I think we've caught this engine just in time. Now I have the fun job of removing all the old gaskets, seals and bearings. In the past I've cleaned the engine block by sandblasting it, but I think with this one, as it's not too extreme, I'm just going to use a wire wheel. although probably not necessary. I'm going to hone the bore. This will keep many of my viewers happy. After honing, it is essential that the bore is thoroughly cleaned. You can see the cross-hatching pattern which has been created. There are plenty of parts to clean. With all of the internal parts cleaned, it is now time to start the reassembly process. The first job is to fit new bearings and seals. Now this is not jam that I'm putting in the engine, this is actually reassembly oil by Permatex. So obviously the reassembly is exactly the same procedure as disassembly, but only in reverse. With the connecting rod bolts fitted, they now need to be torqued, so I'm using a torque wrench to achieve the correct setting. Once again, I'm using the torque wrench to achieve the correct torque setting on the crankcase cover or sump. Sadly, we need to move away from the clean components and we need to go back to the cylinder head because this needs to be disassembled, cleaned and then reassembled. The first step is to remove the valve rockers. Astonishingly, unlike most of the other engines I've ever worked on, these valve springs are so soft that you can actually remove them just with your thumbs. Usually you need a valve spring compressor. And unsurprisingly, the valves look to be in very good condition. To clean up the cylinder head, I'm going to use a soda blaster. Evidently, the soda blaster does do a fairly good job. There is still some staining from the gasket, but this really doesn't matter. This area is not even seen. So now I'm going to lap the valves in, not that they really need it, but it is good practice. In case you're wondering why this would be done, it's so the valve can create a nice tight seal. That's looking good. Now the cylinder head can be reassembled. With a new gasket fitted, the cylinder head is then fitted onto the engine, ensuring the push rods are in their correct positions, and then the valves can be set. We've not finished with the torque wrench yet. These cylinder head bolts need to be torqued. And now it's time to set the valves. After a quick check to make sure everything is working correctly, the valve rocker cover can then be refitted. This is followed by the flywheel, which I have cleaned up and given a good coat of primer. It's time to go back to the carburetor. I'm going to fully disassemble it, as I have done with everything else, clean it, and then reassemble it. Here is the gasket kit, which includes the bowl gasket. And with the carburetor fully reassembled, I'm just going to give it a quick coat of petrol-resistant lacquer, because I have actually soda blasted this and I don't want it to rust again. We're now getting on to the final reassembly. So that is the majority of the rebuild complete, but of course we do still have the very rusty muffler, and the screws are stuck. I'm creating a cut so I can use a flathead screwdriver to remove these, and then they'll be heated up just to really guarantee they'll come out. They were a bit stubborn, but we got there in the end. The cover can be sandblasted and powder coated. As for the muffler, that can just be wire wheeled and then painted with heat resistant paint. I'm now sandblasting other parts as well, so I can just do a couple of bakes in the oven. With all of the parts sandblasted, I can now powder coat them. And into the oven they go at 180 degrees for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. And there we have it, they can now be left to cool down. Now I completely overlooked the fact that I don't have a fuel tank for this engine, so I have managed to source one. It doesn't look very good. I sandblasted it, and that is also getting the powder coating treatment. I was particularly impressed by how well the fuel tank came out. With a new, more up-to-date fuel tank cap fitted, it really does look brand new. So now the final few parts can be fitted: the muffler, the air intake, the ignition coil, and the fuel tank. The ignition coil is fitted, ensuring that the correct air gap is achieved. To do this, I'm using just a business card. Actually, this is included with the Briggs & Stratton ignition coils. It's a card that you can use to get the right air gap. But you can also use a feeler gauge. It needs to be 10 thou. With the fuel tank connected up to the carburetor, all that's left to do is to fit the recoil cover and the air intake. And of course I am fitting a new air filter to this engine. I don't think any restoration would be complete without decals, so I do have a new decal to put onto the recoil cover. And there we have it. The engine is finished. All that's left is to put some fresh oil and petrol into it, and we'll see if it runs. seemed to be a great success. I really hope you've enjoyed this restoration video. Thank you so much for watching, and until the next one, see you again soon.